Welcome to Dweller of the Dark. We are a channel honoring the yellow and blackened bones of many prominent authors. We will be digging up several obscure, strange, and forgotten authors who influenced many of the great horror, science fiction, and fantasy writers to date. More tales of the horrifying, obscure, strange, and forgotten are climbing out of the tombs. Subscribe, comment, like, donate, or I'll send Thaddeus Forge to steal your heathen soul. Unknown horror masters, send us ghoulish delights for the Skull and Bones collection. Your pound of writer's flesh will continue to feed our ghouls from now. Books, websites, podcasts, in the links below. Children of Horror, Legion, Ghouls. Tonight, this one is dedicated to Sharky Sharkin, Thomas Swafford, ARW CWB, the Children of Horror, and the Legion of Ghouls. Devilishly devoted to horror, and the souls always be.
Eagles flying high, cats on the prowl, devils in your bed, their whispers so loud, witches on my heels, so they'll steal, running in the dark, truth they conceal, blood on the walls, spattering us sink. God can't help the dead, no time to think. Hounds howl at night, shadows in the light, fear in every breath, eyes wide with fright. Cards dealt by fate, no way to escape. Threads getting tight, can't see the daylight. Blood on the walls, spattering us sink. God can't help the dead, no time to think. Cards dealt by fate, no way to escape. Threads getting tight, can't see the daylight. Blood on the walls, spattering us sink. God can't help the dead, no time to think.
The Cats of Belle Rouge by Jeffrey LeBlanc. First published October 2023. Ode to Timber. Under skies of silver moonbeams, this feline lady loves to sing. As bats titter and swoop, child of Bastet patiently stoops. With green torchlit eyes, meowing her song to the fireflies. The music of the night is her orchestral delight. But now she groans, slighted, outraged, she moans. Her nemesis, the warbler, returns. The feathered fiend she yearns. Scurrying is another she detests. The black spider has dared nest. Arachnic legs raised against furred paw, both run away, calling their tangle a draw. The moon ascends, and she hears the hoot of an owl, replying in kind to his lonely song, she sends a friendly howl. There's one last challenger to her humble abode. Away, warts and all, the hopping, croaking toad. 1. Drum beats roared across the coastal estuaries of Louisiana. Joining their echoing thunder are blood-curdling screams that lambasted out across the swamps surrounding Skull Sands. Peering in through the swamp and swaying marshlands, one might have seen, dancing silhouettes by blazing firelight. They might have heard the exultations emanated from a congregation, a voodoo congregation, gathered in the midst of bonfire and shadow. In the crowd's center, curiously writhing like a venomous snake, is an ancient voodoo queen, nearly 80 years of age. Unbelievably, the relic of a woman with her feathered and bone crown moves with the grace of a girl decades younger. She limbos and twists, moving in a swan-like circle. Then the queen leaps about with all the agility of a panther. Those horrific and terrifying screams heard earlier with the thundering drums, her screams are almost ecstatic as the voodoo queen takes her leathered claw of a hand with a silver knife and slices the throat of a chicken. Shaking the white-feathered dying creature, the voodoo queen splatters her faithful followers in crimson blood. Then all goes silent and solemn in the moonlight. A glorious full moon blazed over the endless forest of palmetto and twisted ancient oaks. Shadowed within, a bonfire rages, and a crowd of lost children sit by the fire swaying to drum beats and rhythmic singing of songs from a faraway land. They are the most unlikely group of voodoo practitioners assembled. Their long-forgotten African lineage, if they knew it, would be as vast and distant as the stars hovering over the earth. These wayward children were the outcast of their noble houses, set by their own or evilly tricked into bondage on a foreign shore. They are the lion-fighting Tiv and Terabah from the northern mountains of Western Africa. They are the huddled, fearless, fiery-tempered Nupe toward the country's east. The dancing and singing lovers of life, the Igbo, chorusing how they endure under their spiritual mother, the moon. Then there are the sullen and rebellious Ijo, who bend the knee to no one. If only these wayward sons and daughters could have seen a glimpse into who they were, how much of their furious anger and outrage might have been quenched in the cooling waters of knowledge. But enough of the never will be. As the reverent voodoo queen, Queen Mina Babette, casts a shadow glance to all, the music quiets, and only the wind through the creaky trees, the sizzle of the bonfire, and the scratching drone of the palmetto is heard. Everyone else gathered round. The fire is silent as the grave. With her eyes lit by the roaring fire as brilliant sapphires, she begins her lurid tale. Not so long ago, when I was but a child, my family escaped our devilish masters. We stole into the deepest and darkest swamps we could find. We pushed past the legendary Avalon in our journey. Some in the crowd gasped. Others, who had a Catholic upbringing, made the sign of the cross and whispered a plea to the Mother Mary. Avalon Island and the dark demons that were rumored to reside there brought many to shivers just by a mention of the name of that dark, ominous land. Queen Babette raised her head slightly and turned to look at each of the shadowed faces lit by the orange flames. Yes, I see your fear. And to answer the question on all your minds, yes, Avalon Island is a hell on earth, filled with things that are akin to demons, but far, far worse. However, if you make it past those water vipers, the hordes of bats, and the leeches, and you survive. For many of my kin were indeed taken by the espoused slithering monstrosities there. A heaven would have been awaiting you. Well, Belle Rouge once was a heaven of pristine waters, swaying emerald willows, and more crawfish and fish than anyone can eat in a lifetime. But that was so long ago, eons it seems to me now, for it is no longer a paradise, but an accursed land that no human dare set foot on. She stayed quiet for a while. Her congregation respected her time of silence and reflection on the past. It was known by all that voodoo practitioners in their macabre dark arts will often warn of the dead town of Belle Rouge. But Queen Babette had a different warning about the dreaded and dangerous island, for her story was far different than any of the other conjurers professing prophetic warnings. The voodoo queen of nearly 80 years was one of the only people to have been known to survive the island's apocalypse. She was one of the only survivors when the teeth of Satan himself gnawed and clawed all the settlers there to a bloody crimson mash. The swamp fire continued to sizzle and crack as the commune listened to its flames. The silver moon rose higher across the heavens and illuminated the ghostly swaths of Spanish moss across the swamplands. The shadows of palm and tree grew long in the deep woods. On the brow of the lost children of Africa, they grew long as well, as it seemed the night might be ending and everyone would scurry away back to their homes for the night. The feared voodoo queen began her tale again. As her leathered hands animated above smoke and flame, between the sway of moss and palmetto, she whispered solemnly, "No one goes on the island of Belle Rouge and expects to live. Falling onto the island shores, even by happenstance or accident, guarantees you a certain death by them." Queen Babette, who are the them you speak of? A confused boy with ebony eyes and the skin of deepest bronze asked. He could be no older than 15, with his scarecrow-like frame and kind face. He stared with his mouth closed and eyes wide on the ageless, ancient voodoo queen. "I have warned you all before to stay away from Black Bayou. I have said Avalon Island is a hell on earth if you are foolish enough to paddle onto its demoniac shores." She took a long, tired, haggard breath. The breath sounded as leathered and coarse as her hands. "To my devout believers, the deadly inhabitants lying in wait for those wayward fools venturing the forbidden swamps of Avalon, hail to the demons stalking and hiding on Belle Rouge. Yes, I say there are worse things than giant leeches and vampires. Ghastly Avalon, home to alligator, cottonmouths, and maybe a succubus or two, hold no comparison to those creatures. Belle Rouge, which lies south beyond the silted waters of the Atchafalaya River, and its native creatures have never terrified me as those four-legged devils pouring across the marsh and swamplands. Those hideous immortal things in their glimmering green eyes, always searching for flesh and blood. It's the cats of Belle Rouge that make this old heart still skip a beat." Her eyes widened as she put a clawed hand to her languished, pale face. Then she lowered her head and let tears fall, to the shock of all at the fireside vigil. She shook her head and screamed out. "Devils they were, nightmarish, stalking demons they still are. I still can see what they did to my daddy and mama. I cursed them and all theirs, still smelling the coppery pools of rent flesh and pools of blood from what was left of my little brother. Yes, I cursed them to hell and beyond for what those heartless monsters did to Ethan. He was a thing of joy and innocence. I begged them to take me, not him. The cats should have spared him that was so pure of heart. The woman again paused and wiped her mournful eyes. It had been a half a century since she'd lost her beloved family, but the scars from the cats had never healed. The ancient lady, voodoo queen Nina Babette, with wrinkled skin like scorched parchment, pointed with a shaky claw to the gathered crowd by her roaring fire. Belle Rouge is now a ghost town because of the cats. It sits east of the Devil of Black Bayou's Isle of the undead Avalon. That's right, I say Anton Valtaire's name tonight, but only once as point of reference, for his island never bled like Belle Rouge. It was a town whose very earth still bleeds from the death there. The queen took a deep sigh and pointed to the south of their bonfire. Once, it had been the pearl of the Louisiana coast and a beacon of prosperity. Now it's a burnt-down husk of shacks and rusted heaps of metal. It's a phantom town haunted by wraiths that glide in its shadows. A town destroyed by avarice, vanity, and unspeakable acts. Belle Rouge is a dead town by its own unfortunate hand. A squat boy of 20, with a pumpkin-sized smile, named Simon LaRue, wiped his damp upper lip. With a rag from his back pocket, he wiped the growing cold sweat on his flame-illuminated brow as he asked, "But what happened to Belle Rouge? Was it the wall? All the British?" "No group of men wiped out that town," Queen Babette crowed and cackled. All of her congregation jumped at her cawing voice. The mummified relic of black magic, Queen Babette shifted on a log she was perched and continued. "Where once flourished the population, there are only cats I mentioned. Only the stalking, bestial cats inhabit the island, scrambling up the cypress, pawing in the blackjack, and preying on anything that moves within their hellish gaze. No alligator swims onto Belle Rouge's banks for fear of being gnashed to death. No snake slithers within the reeds of the shoreline, terrified of those venomous claws. No bats dare titter and dart in its cypress forest. All beasts, predator and prey, are afraid of the cats of Belle Rouge. They are not of this earth. They do not belong in our place of existence. Yet, since before the rise of the pyramids of Egypt, before the first stone was placed to create the Sphinx, they were already rulers of the land." Another woman with braids of fiery red weaved into her head asked as the fires glint her chestnut eyes, "Why does no one kill off the cats? How come no one destroys all of this horde?" Scowling, annoyed that her words weren't heeded, Queen Babette replied with a dismissive hand and frown. "As decreed by the darkest of sorceresses, Morgan Le Fay, sitting before the winter bonfires of Belle Rouge one late autumn night. A monstrous, haggard thing, mind you. She held a cat in its talons, watching the descendant of Bastet purr, and then speak to the amazement of the townsfolk. The deadly witch who had defeated the noble King Arthur and crumbled his kingdom of Camelot, hissed, 'No one, under penalty of a fate worse than death, may kill a cat on the island of Belle Rouge. My beloved and noble children of the night are the very diadems of the ancient demons. There is a reason these creatures have been worshipped long into antiquity. Their souls are entwined with the shadow worlds which men cannot see and fear. They ruled Mesopotamia long before it was a kingdom. They instructed ancient Egypt in the building of the Valley of the Kings and the pyramids. They were alive and worshipped in forgotten Atlantis and Hyperborea. These cats of Belle Rouge, the ones your people let be tortured, killed, and desecrated, are my coven and all the ancient sorcery's lifeblood. They are all magical creations kin, stretching back to the hillsides of Greece, the mountains of the Himalayas, and the jungles of the deepest Congo. The blood of the lion, the soul of the satyr, and the language of the sphinx resides on their tongue. The bones of her necklace rattled slightly as she went on. Ageless, infinite, wizened, and eternal, they still endure with their glistening eyes always aware. Across strange eons, at the birth of the sun and dawn of the universe, they have watched and listened. The ancient Greek satyrs, the Lamia, and the Sphinx are mere children to the ancient knowledge the cats of Belle Rouge have secreted and forgotten. Queen Babette let her words settle, and she closed her eyes a moment, remembering the face of the hag, Morgan Le Fay. It wasn't long before someone made a jest to interrupt her memory from so long ago. But I've seen them chase their tails for hours like a lost fool. An older African man lamented, causing the crowd to laugh. It was a needed moment of levity after the dark witch's lurid tale. Glaring her eyes like vaporous red flames at the jest. Those are not the descendants of the ancient cats of Belle Rouge. Queen Babette growled, silencing the laughs and chuckles. In Belle Rouge, before Morgan Le Fay left her flame decree of warning on the very souls of all Belle Rouge, the town had already broken its word. The witch knew that the town was doomed. The cats had told her all and sealed Belle Rouge's fate. If I had come forth and spoke the truth, maybe we could have saved Belle Rouge. I could have saved my little Ethan. Wiping back a tear, Queen Babette put her hands together in prayer. If anyone had said, "Can we have mercy, Mademoiselle?" We promise that we never will harm or kill a cat. Maybe, just maybe, the cats would have spared all. Or if we just sacrificed the evil Claunes to them. Simon furrowed his brow and cocked his head, puzzled, to the voodoo queen. Who are the Claunes, Queen Babette? Her face tightened and her lips pursed, recalling the Claunes to Simon and her followers. They were the most vile of families, the Claunes family. Between the cypress and swaying moss, they kept their wood-hewn house, adorned with ghoulish trophies of the most macabre. They pleasured in stringing, tying, or nailing to trees the diseased, dead, and dying bodies of cats. Surrounded by strung-up, swaying, screaming cats, the ghouls, for the Claunes could never be called human, dwelt and rested amongst the screams of the tortured felines, whilst their father, Klaus Claune, lumbered the cypress to sell. His malignant wife and inbred children committed hideous deeds to the cats. They took even greater delight in taking the trapped and tortured felines and placing them all over the bayous for gar or gator to feed, or placing them in the highest trees for hawks and owls to feast. Queen Mina Babette took a deep, coarse sigh and closed her eyes a minute, recalling, then spoke through gleaming, protuberant teeth, practically seething. And these degenerates laughed and boasted to anyone who'd hear the details on how they slayed beloved cats of their family, friends, and neighbors alike. Truly, the soulless monsters and their detestable ilk relished in their macabre collection of cat dead, rotted corpses, maggot-infested, eyes missing, and entrails decaying, of the cats heaped around their home as tributes to heartless tyrants. They took glee each time they could present a trophy to their negligent neighbor and proclaim uproariously the regretful friend's dereliction to protect their cat. But why did they do it, Queen Babette? Why kill the cats? They weren't hurting anyone. A young girl of 12 with a lithe frame asked as the night winds tossed her unkempt, curly brown hair. The winds continued to howl as screaming cats as the congregation waited around the swirling white smoke and red flames. Raising her creased right brow, the aged queen shrugged. Why did they butcher the majestic cats? I know not. But I am aware throughout human existence that many have hated the wailful voice of cat crooning in the night. Maybe these evil folk held deep-seated superstitions that compelled them to such atrocities. I can't really say. Queen Babette looked out to the south again in the direction of Belle Rouge. Then she turned back to her followers and continued. Maybe they believed foolishness. Maybe the fools believe it an ill omen if cats should run amok, especially around twilight. But whatever the reason, waddling Claunes and his heartless wife Belle were allowed by the town to take their pleasure out on the torture of the cats of Belle Rouge. They tricked them with poison, they trapped them with snares, they slayed any and all cats which came near to their shack. The community would hear the pleas and mournful wails of the cats in the fog during a thunderstorm or in the blackest of night, and all turned a blind eye to the transgressions to the poor felines. Many might have seen the cat deaths as off, but never further investigated the untold deaths of the animals. But as the cat deaths multiplied, some people began to question why there were so many deaths. Why the maniacal focus on ridding the island of Belle Rouge of every cat living there? Those questioning African Americans, Cajuns, or Creoles scratched their heads trying to figure out what Claunes' ultimate goal with the fly swarm display of dead cats was. But there lie an unspoken belief, a sincere concern carried out of earshot of the Claunes. The concern was this: if the Claunes were willing to go to such lengths of mutilation and desecration of a poor, innocent cat, what would stop them from doing the same thing to an innocent child? Had they done so already? There had been several disappearances of children and even adults over the last years. All had been attributed to mishaps and alligators. But now the possibility the bodies might lay in the macabre pile of growing cats in and around the Claunes land was on everyone's mind. Whether it was from their despicable behavior or because of it, the Claunes started to resemble more and more graveyard ghouls. Their once rounded and plump faces stretched back as wet leather in the sun. Their teeth, bared back, animalistic, became more protuberant. And when seen in the moonlight, for that was the only time in the latter years you saw a Claune outdoors, the teeth gleamed luminescent in the moonlight. Their withered, emaciated faces continued to pull back even onto their death, like the faces of living corpses. Their frames became frightfully scarecrow-like, and all the Claune hands and toes began to resemble talons. And as the years crept to their inevitable demise, the more people avoided them like the eaters of the dead they were. For it was beyond rumor in the end that the Claunes were trapping and killing more than cats by then. It would be easy for a stranger, or dare I say a child in town, to disappear with the Claunes ghouls around. Their camp nestled under the spidery oaks, webbed with hundreds of layers of carpeted Spanish moss, concealed all their devilish deeds. Their cypress home recessed in the darkness, hidden under spreading oaks at the back of a neglected yard of swaying swamp grasses, could easily muffle the screams. But why did they not run them out? Why risk their kin and their cats to be killed, or worse, by the ghouls? A lithe girl with skin the color of copper and eyes of sky blue, Monique Laveau, leaned with the silken smoothness and mannerisms of a feline to ask. Queen Babette had a sense of unease by the way the girl locked her cat-like eyes on the ancient queen. Queen Babette had always feared the Laveau name in her dark practice. They had been powerful conjurers and healers in their own right. She couldn't understand why this Monique was even at her ceremonies. It made no sense, her presence among Queen Mina Babette's followers. And her feeling bit in like a viper's bite, telling the ancient conjurer that this peculiar Laveau girl already knew the answer. Queen Mina Babette would bet her life on it. Queen Babette grimaced and nodded to the girl. They tried, Monique, but the evil in the Claunes knew no bounds. They threatened curses and gris-gris on anyone who dared try and report them to the law. No one doubted their powers of evil with the way the whole family looked by that time. I told you, they were all necromancers and ghouls, nightmarish, unworldly, shunned by the sun in the chilling twilight of their lives. But a brave few, finally trekked up into Morgan City for the sheriff to be dispatched and investigate. Oddly enough, the men who went and fetched the sheriff never returned, all suspected to meet some nefarious end by them damn Claunes. It was on St. John's Eve when the worst storm in over 100 years rolled into Belle Rouge. Purplish arcs of lightning lit the sky ablaze in blinding light. Anything that hadn't gotten 6 or more feet off the ground drowned in the murky, flooded water. Hurricane winds tore roofs and downed trees. Roaring thunder deafened ears as it cracked across the flooded lands of the island of Belle Rouge. As the stinging rains crashed on the tin roofs of the homes, a small pirogue washed in from Black Bayou, the small boat carrying the strangest of passengers. The passenger was an elderly, hunched-over woman with gnarled hands and hunched body, like something out of a fairy tale dream or a grim nightmare. She was, by all accounts, a lecherous soul with her sparkling green eyes, cat's eyes. She claimed heritage as a secretive conjurer from an ancient foreign land. Some who made it from Belle Rouge before its penultimate cataclysm swore the hag spoke in a Scottish dialect. Others would attest that the bogle was Irish ancestry from the forest deep within the old country. But many more believed wholeheartedly that her lineage was from those most haunted of English lands, home to the Fane, the Fawn, the Hellhound, and the Satyrs, the mystic Moors. But all agree her tongue was not French. The Belle Rouge men pulled a boat in and carried the ancient one out of the silted water and pelting rain. They helped her ashore, and the family, the Melançon family, gave her dry clothes, a warm fire, spiced meats, and lodging. How she came to Louisiana and remote Belle Rouge to this day is a mystery. There's no way she paddled the Atlantic in so small a craft in the swell and storms. The reason she left her mysterious isle was another mystery. Folks speculated, and still do, as to the why. The hag gave many reasons, and none at all in her replies. She claimed initially she was a runaway escaping from being sacrificed by the Druids. Other times, she mentioned as she burned the knits off her blackened metallic woven garb to be the sorceress for an ancient race of Celts. But the more intriguing tale she whispered by shadowed firelight came as she dined with the Melançon family. As the crawfish were spread and the steam wisped around the woman with wrinkled leathered skin and eyes the color of emeralds, she said what no one expected when asked. It might have been Titus Melançon that posed the question to the odd woman with silvery ghostly hair. Mademoiselle, I know you have had a harrowing journey. To survive such a storm and make it here to Belle Rouge safely is a miracle, no doubt. Titus Melançon, I wouldn't call my visit of divine providence. On the contrary, my journey to Belle Rouge is more of a matter of vindication for those tortured and brutally killed. Your people will have a reckoning for allowing such things to continue for so long. The woman gave a stern stare to the pious but cowardly man. Her eyes in the moment were a blazing green balefire. There has been no murders on Belle Rouge that I am aware, mademoiselle. Shrugging and waving a dismissive hand at her accusation. No, there's been no murders here. But to another subject, I would be remiss to not inquire. Who are you? Where does your family hail from? The woman with long spidery fingers put down the crawfish she had just stripped from the shell. She put her hands together and rubbed them slightly, causing the cayenne pepper and seasoning to drop from them. Then locking her emerald cat eyes on Titus, she declared with a cackling laugh, My Titus, I thought you might already suspect who I am. Obviously, I have journeyed far to help my dear friends. Not you, the cats. As the strange woman said these words, the cats outside began to moan and howl. It was as if they were serenading their mistress, their master. The serenade continued to unnerve the group. Then the woman smiled mischievously and waved a hand. The cats stopped instantly. The woman said nothing and gave the man a devilish knowing smile. As she did so, her pointed, protuberant teeth gleamed like razors beneath her cracked and leathered lips. Mon Dieu! Titus jumped back from the table and made the sign of the cross. All the family moved from the table, seeing their patriarch cowering in fear. I'll answer you, coward, for I've known spineless swine like you all my days. Men who let innocent creatures and children be tortured, trapped, and their flesh desecrated by animals. In this case, living, breathing, disgusting, and demoniac ghouls. She stood and adjusted her cloak to leave out in the weather. Then she turned and glanced back for the briefest moment as the lightning ignited the sky, casting long shadows across her dark silhouette. I'm the woman who bested a wizard. I'm the lowly wretch who crushed the arrogant and naive King Arthur and his kingdom, Camelot. Surely you jest, mademoiselle. One of Titus's sons, Thomas, looked on the professed witch with his unyielding brown eyes and clenched jaw. His powerful frame moved around the table as quickly as a swamp panther to accost and throw the witch out of their home. He lived the Bible and believed in one of its core diadems: never suffer a witch. The whole crowd that Queen Babette had been speaking to by the swamp firelight laughed. Only Monique Laveau stayed silent as the grave. Her stoic demeanor made the voodoo queen even more at ease. To change the subject and ease the tension between she and the cousin of the legendary Marie Laveau, Queen Mina Babette continued her tale. Thomas challenged the purported powerful sorceress to explain. I have never heard of this kingdom you speak, or you. Why should my family believe anything you say? For all I know, you fed and trained these cats to act this way and do your bidding. That could be so, Thomas Melanson. Yes, I know your name and the names of everyone who turned their backs on the horrendous torture and murder of my friends and familiars. She bristled at the word familiar. She corrected herself as she pointed a crooked talon of an index finger at everyone in the room. No, none of that is accurate. They are more than friends and familiars to my sorcery brethren. We serve them always. For the cats that reside on Belle Rouge are older than the oldest of my kind. You were tested by these ancient gods and found miserably inept. The youngest daughter of Titus, Alice, looked up with her blue eyes as she brushed back her chestnut hair to speak. I read a book somewhere, Daddy, and everyone. King Arthur was a heroic king that pulled a sword out of a stone. He built a round table. I burnt it when I killed off his knights and crushed his kingdom. The woman croaked, interrupting Alice's response. Her words carried like a proverbial toad. Alice disagreed with the strange woman who had returned to the dinner table and sat. But it was his wicked sister that defeated King Arthur and his knights of the Round Table hundreds of years ago. Her name was Morgan Le Fay, half-sister to King Arthur, the woman who bewitched and entombed the wizard Merlin. Alice scoffed at the old hag's words. Titus shook his head, as did everyone in skepticism. The woman was indeed touched in the head to claim being hundreds of years old. But was she? None of what she said could be proven. Most likely, the woman was a lost lunatic. It would make total sense why she was paddling in the middle of a hurricane on one of the most haunted and dangerous bayous in all of Louisiana. She was touched in the head, or had to be, insane. However, there was the question of her abilities with cats. It was her affection, her loyalty, and her perceived dominion over the cats that had the whole community whispering away. Many of the more superstitious on Belle Rouge, after a few weeks watching the woman's uncanny abilities, started to believe she just might be Morgan Le Fay. And what power she must have wielded in her youth to crush the famed Camelot and its famous king. Morgan had said on her first day on Belle Rouge, I was summoned to help the town of Belle Rouge. The cats asked me to weigh in before they lent their punishment upon all of you. They prayed and pleaded to talk sense into this cowardly community. Therefore, I have come not to rid you of the ghouls, but to plead with you to fall on your knees and beg these ancient feline deities, sons and daughters of Bastet, for forgiveness. Do you understand what I'm saying? Titus and the family, not wanting to get the elderly woman upset, agreed with her terms. However, they did not or could not believe her extraordinary tale. There was no chance she was hundreds of years old, was there? How could she even think to get the town to believe a roaming derelict who landed on Belle Rouge was the legendary sorceress of acclaimed, legendary fame? But in the weeks to follow, all the skepticism and scoffing would gradually start to change, and many would go on to recant their doubts by her signs and wonders. Morgan was a gifted dark mistress unlike anyone the town had ever seen. She would hold seances and spectral visitations. Real ghosts would appear. If Morgan Le Fay read tarot cards or had direct prophecy readings for silver coin, she was always accurate in her readings. When the dark ancient was bored, she would sell homemade charms and trinkets to the masses. Everyone that bought one screamed in amazement that they had worked. But her control of nature and of the animals on Belle Rouge brought the most accolades and astonishment. Storms would cease if she merely raised a finger. The sun would set if she whispered a word from her incantations. A sick person or animal responded immediately to her silent prayers to whatever god she served. As she walked, to the darkest parts of the island. Many followed and prayed to her now. Morgan, despite the throngs of skeptic on Belle Rouge, starting to make people believe she might be all she claimed to be. Only time would tell if the crippled hag with the power of prophecy, the elements, and so much more, deserved to be the latest religion or deity on Belle Rouge. 3. Queen Babette looked up to the moon and cocked her head. She gave a wan smile. I know you are wondering, when did all that trouble happen? I tell you, I try every day to forget the day when the cats reminded humanity why we instinctually fear the darkness. The old voodoo queen wiped cold sweat off her brow. She took a deep sigh and let the air out slowly over the dancing flames of the bonfire, then began again. It started with the swarms of flies across the whole island of Belle Rouge. Yes, if I'm remembering it right, that was the day things began. After the flies had caused their havoc, things calmed like they do just before a bad storm. Anyway, a week, maybe a month later, people started asking about the Claunes. Overnight, they seemed to no longer be around. No more cats were seen hanging in the cypress and willows either. Days had passed, and there had been no sign of the Claunes, no gardening, no boats in water, no traps set. Now, it wasn't strange at first because they had stopped being day creatures. Nobody saw them during the daylight, so no one gave a damn. And when the next hurricane erupted across Belle Rouge, tearing their house to bits, no one still cared. Most, in fact, rejoiced that the Claunes finally left with their devilish ways to lands unknown. Or so we thought. It was Titus who picked up on the early changes. I remember seeing Titus Melanson as he rubbed his chin and grimaced. He made a profound observation. They wouldn't have left their boats behind. I find it odd Claunes will leave his gun and traps too. Skeeter Tebow added in. Yes, part for weeks. Other than the flies, there haven't been any more cats killed. Wasn't that right after Morgan Le Fay, crazy cat lady, said no more cats were to be killed? You are correct, Skeeter. But here's the funny part. I haven't seen any cats, living or dead, on Belle Rouge lately. Hampton Abel, a squat dwarfish man, rubbed his bearded chin and answered. Come to think of it, all the cats seemed to have disappeared, and there hasn't been any traps set out or poison. I wonder what gives. I did see Morgan Le Fay, Daddy. The young daughter of Titus pointed to where she'd seen the witch. Alice nodded and directed her father to the sandy beach on the western side of Belle Rouge. A light breeze gusted up and caused her hair to lift up as she continued to explain. She was standing in the rain a week ago. She had on this funny hat. It was like a crown of thorns with horns all around and a gold circular thing in the crown's center. She was screeching something up to the clouds, then everything stopped. Right after, the buzzing flies crawled out of the ground and swarmed the ghoul house. With a stern, authoritative brow, Titus ordered his daughter to do the following. Alice, I need you to go back to the house. Tell Mama I'm going to go check out the Claunes' house. Make sure they gone. Yes, Daddy. Alice lowered her shoulders, huffed disappointed, and wandered slowly home. We need to go inside the house, fellows. Titus looked to see Skeeter and Hampton frozen in their tracks. Both men, wide-eyed and pale from what Titus was about to do. They seemed paralyzed by fear or something worse. Terror. Titus Melanson tried to urge them on, but neither Hampton nor Skeeter wanted a part of Titus's plan. Titus tried to pull Skeeter by the gruff of his neck. Skeeter slapped away Titus's hand, then glared a fist at his half-crazed, foolish friend. Skeeter said as much in his protest. I ain't going into the ghoul's house, Titus. There was something wrong with them folks from the time they came here. Them people weren't right. They were bona fide ghouls. If I see how they lived in that wreck of house of theirs, I'm liable to never be the same again. I have enough nightmares to keep me awake at night. I don't need any more. Titus waved a dismissive hand at Skeeter, then barked. Fine. Guard the outside of the place while me and Hampton take a quick look. I won't be in there 5 minutes too. I never said I was going in there either, Titus Melanson. If you want to go kicking around a hornet's nest, feel free. But leave me out of climbing into a house, most likely filled up with dead, rotting bodies or worse. Those ghouls might still be lurking around, and we just haven't seen them. Hampton interrupted angrily and pointed at the collapsed house of the notorious Claunes. I tell you what we are going to do. It's in the best interest of all of us to make sure once and for all the Claunes are gone, lost, dead, or not in that house. We all will sleep a little easier if in fact the ghouls are dead. Titus took a tired breath, then pointed back to the large open front portion of the house, in what had once had to have been the Claunes' living room. A massive oak, tossed by the last hurricane, had crushed that particular portion of the house to splinters. You are just bound and determined to kick up the flames of these hellspawn, Skeeter growled as he started toward the remnants of the Claunes' home. Fine, let's get this over with. But if I see one ghoul, I'm running. The door collapsed in the minute Titus went to push on the door. Well, it didn't fall in. It disintegrated into a pile of dust from a relentless assault of termites through the 6 or more months. The house had been left in ruin. Inside the remnants of the dwelling, things weren't much better. Despite being resistant to mold and rot, the termites had once again ate through structural supports and boarding to all of the men's surprise. Hampton pushed back his hat and wiped cypress dust off his shoulders as he entered into the Claune home after Titus. Titus, I know we got termites on Belle Rouge, but I've never seen this voracious to eat a house to the ground. Even the wood beetles are joining in by the herds. Skeeter jumped out of his skin from a beetle crawling on his neck. After he had swiped the obsidian large bug away, he agreed. Yes, this place won't last another 3 months by the way they are eating. Never in all my time in the swamp have I seen critters work this quickly. If it makes either of you feel better, neither have I. Something must have drawn so many here. Titus narrowed his eyes, searching for any potential cause. Then shrugging, he walked into the left of the overrun building and made a turn by a set of collapsing stairs. In a crawl space beneath the stairs, the men took off their hats. They had made a chilling discovery. Their skulls are all misshapen, Titus. Skeeter gulped, staring on 4 unusually deformed and large skeletons. They looked like they had grown claws and horns, too. Hampton furrowed his brow and narrowed his brown eyes, studying the bones of what was the former tenants of the Claune house. He murmured solemnly with a half-lowered head. I know we called them ghouls as a joke because of their odd hours and the stuff they did. But honest to God, himself, gentlemen, they might have really been, well, actual ghouls. I agree that something weird caused all those changes to the bones. Maybe it was inbreeding. I wouldn't put anything past Klaus Claune. That man, while alive, was pure evil. See, he has the horns to prove it. Titus pointed and tried to ease Hampton and Skeeter's growing dread of what they had found with his jest. The other two men smiled a moment and then frowned as something else, something macabre and grisly, caught their eyes. Behind the bodies, in what seemed like an elaborate root cellar, but looked more like an intricately dug and fortified labyrinth, the men peered, trying to let their eyes adjust to the dark. After a moment, they saw what the walls of the cellar were. Mon Dieu, mon amis, they were ghouls, Skeeter exclaimed and recoiled back. For in the areas where something had done from above, revealing small patches of light, all the men realized that the walls were corpses used as brick. There were desiccated bodies of cats. There were mummified bodies of alligators and all manner of dead swamp creature. But the most hideous block of them all were countless human ones. All manner of human body in various forms of decomposition riddled the labyrinth walls. I don't know about you gentlemen, but I've seen enough. Titus made haste with his friends and scrambled out of the crypt of the Claunes. For never again would anyone ever call the place a home for the living. Titus gathered everyone he could find for a meeting. Something had to be done about all the bodies stacked in the house. He felt it was unnatural to just leave them as wall material. The bones and all needed a proper Christian burial, even if many of the deceased or murdered had not been Christians. We have to pull them out of that evil house. We need to do our best to figure who they were, but above all else, we need to give their bodies a proper burial so their souls can rest. The mayor of the town, Charles Bordelon, waddled up, rubbing his double chin briskly. He added, "Yes, it's the right thing to do. It's the godly thing to do." He lowered his head slightly and locked his whitish blue eyes on everyone who had assembled one by one before admonishing and identifying a major problem. "But who are we going to get to volunteer for the cleanup? Which of you brave men and women wants to go crawling into that maggot and worm-riddled earth, enclosed in that tomb-like darkness, with all of them bones, all those murdered souls, and all them vengeful ghosts?" He took a sigh, then added to everyone's dread, "And let's not even get me started about all the devils and dark things such a murderous place attracts. By the way, Titus, didn't you say the Claunes and their kin were sprouting horn on their skulls when you found them?" "Yes, they had horns and other changes to them." The whole crowd went deathly silent. No one dared say a word after hearing about the Claunes having horns. To ease everyone, "It might have been inbreeding, folks. Not the supernatural stuff all of you have on your minds." "That might explain the children, Titus," Mayor Bordelon noted as he cocked his head and then pointed to the collapsing former home of Claunes. But Claunes and Belle had changed too. They were normal looking when they arrived here years ago. They went years still looking like your average Cajun family. How do you explain their anomalies?" "I can't explain any of it, to be honest, Mayor." Titus shook his head and shrugged. "All I know for sure is they are certainly dead. They killed a lot of cats, people, and God knows what all. I want to make it right and bury everyone and everything in hallowed ground before all the death brings in something worse than the Claunes ghouls." "What could be worse than a ghoul, Titus Melanson?" The eerily cackling voice brought chills down Titus's spine. As she hobbled up to join the town in their meeting, Morgan Le Fay pointed a crooked talon at the once enviable cypress house of the dead Claunes. Unapologetically, Titus cast a stern but worrisome glance over to the hideous hag. to the ancient crone with his head lowered and his eyes down, looking at the red, leaf-covered ground. He admitted as much.
Well, if I'm guessing, Morgan Le Fay, I'd say a witch from the Dark Ages. And I'm starting really to believe you are she that crushed Camelot.
The witch pushed back her cloak. She studied each of the nervous faces with her emerald eyes without blinking. She cast a sinister gaze to the young. Morgan locked her green torchlit eyes in mirth to the elderly. She moved those same reptile green eyes hypnotically toward the rest. Then finally Morgan Le Fay cackled.
These ancient storm winds are cruel, merciless, and cold, but their chill is nothing to Belle Rouge's heart, I'm told. Death is my tool. These hands are cemetery stone. Pitiful children of Bastet, you were forsaken, left alone. Cowardly town, reap a fate, worse than death, alas. What happens now? A godlike reckoning comes to pass. Devil paws scorched their prints, and feline teeth hellion scent. Oh, accursed Belle Rouge, pray for mercy and repent.
A groan, like thousands of wailing cats, came from her voice. The clouds overhead blackened and sent out a fury of wind, rain, and lightning in the same instance. Everyone save Morgan Le Fay took to their homes for cover. A second wail of the unnerving and uncanny wailing erupted from the dark sorceress. Everyone put their hands to their ears to block out the deafening, deadly moan. All talk of the dead was forgotten as the folks hunkered down for their reckoning from the god Bastet. 2 hours, 3 hours, or 6, no one knows when the horde came, but came they did and left a bloody swath in their wake. Some will say they were just cats, but make no mistake, they were vicious, larger, and stealthier than a gang of demons from the pits of Avernus. Onward they stalked, leapt, clawed, and killed. Climbing ancient oaks, they dropped to roof and crashed through windows for the blood of their prey. Those that escaped their homes and ran or swam from Belle Rouge perished faster. Townsfolk fleeing to their boats were tossed in the storm and pushed back to shore, where Bastet's slathering and growling children ripped and gnashed them to death. The most powerful men of the island, like Titus Melançon, could not best these savage beasts, and were ripped and chewed limb to limb, unrecognizable. Children boxed in their most elaborate or safe areas were yanked from their protected places and torn to ravaged bits. By the crimson dawn of the next morning, not a single soul of Belle Rouge survived. No living creature moved, not a beast stirred, save the cats of Belle Rouge. Simon Leroux seemed puzzled by Queen Mina Babette's last words. He started to ask a question, then paused in his doing so. He bristled, grimaced, and then finally, after the voodoo queen made a gesture in hand to spit out his question, he asked, "You said no living creature moved, Queen Babette. You told us that not a beast stirred but the cats of Belle Rouge." "That's correct, Simon." Queen Babette locked her eyes on the boy and grinned. "Then, if that's the case, how are you here?" Everyone around the fire looked wide-eyed to one another and whispered nervously the same question. The voodoo queen, who was much older than the body of Mina Babette, who died on Belle Rouge over 80 years ago, didn't say a word. She just looked on the glowing red coals of the dwindling bonfire and rested her hand on a cane of twisted hemlock. In the same moment that the ancient woman glanced reverently on the fires and her crowd of followers were tittering nervously, a black cat jumped into the sorceress's lap. The cat with blazing green eyes was the largest cat anyone had ever seen in the voodoo community of Skull Sands. Perched regally on Queen Mina Babette's lap, the cat spied carefully the crowd. Then the unusual feline, with its fur the color of night winds, let out an unnerving, ancient wail, stunning everyone to silence. With its fur shimmering like the sheen of obsidian by the dwindling flames, the old witch pet her familiar gently and let out a booming cackle, causing all the voodoo devout to scatter like rats. The ageless black feline looked up curiously to Morgan Le Fay and mewed, puzzled. Meow. They are a strange lot, I agree, Asmodeus, but damn fine entertainment. She rubbed Asmodeus's ears and continued to pet the regal demon as the two sat under a silver moon in a roaring, warm bonfire. Its eyes, though, those emerald, torchlit eyes, studied the darkness and swaying shadows of the woods. For hours as the fires blazed, it sat almost motionless, then casting a glance back toward the orange, flickering fire, with the glint of the flames in its eyes, it mewed, meow, and purred up to the ancient sorceress, as each solemnly watched the other. Shadows danced amongst the palmetto. There was the sway of Spanish moss overhead, and the creaking of live oaks all around. Both seemed unbothered by time, without a care in the world. As the black cat shifted on the ancient sorceress's lap, it gazed back toward the orange flickering flames of the fire, then up to the silver moon, and gave a playful meow. Meow! It yawned, sat up, and arched its back to stretch while perched on the witch's lap. Then ancient Asmodeus lowered his head and licked his paw. Thank you for listening. Have a great night.